Okay. Having said that, just 2 or 3 30 seconds here. I'm going to switch over the host and project my screen and set up, and then pass it over to Randolph Lewis, who most of you know. He's our director of campus facilities, and he has oversight of all of our volunteers. Mr. Randolph, you about ready, sir?
Yes, I am. All right, thank you so much, Becky, for projecting this. I was having a little trouble with my device projecting my slideshow, so Becky has taken that on, so thanks, Becky. Can everybody hear me, first of all? I see one thumbs up. Okay, looks good. All right, great. Okay, so welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this training and for your willingness to volunteer. As a basic school, we consider Pioneer Springs a true community of learning, and parent volunteers play a big part in that community. We know that you're excited to volunteer, and we appreciate that so much. And the purpose of this training is to give you the tools you need for success in that role. Today's training is going to be in 3 main parts. The first having to do with health and safety, and next some basic information about volunteering, and then we'll finish up with some ideas to keep in mind as you're interacting with students in your role as a volunteer. All right, next slide, please.
I am trying to advance, Mr. Randolph. Here's our first technical issue.
Okay, actually, and then advance one more, please, Becky. All right, so we'll start with just going over some basic categories of volunteer opportunities at Pioneer Springs. Classroom volunteers may be what you think of first with volunteering. Classroom volunteers support teachers, often allowing them to offer special activities or centers in the classroom that wouldn't be possible without extra help. Any other volunteering on campus that involves interacting with students would also fall into this category, including helping out during lunch and recess. These volunteer needs and opportunities will generally be communicated to you by classroom teachers in their weekly communications or newsletters. We also need volunteers at special events to help staff the events, to help with setup and breakdown, etc. These community events are generally coordinated by Erin McDonald, who is our Director of Community and Advancement. And she does that often with the help of Wings, our homegrown PTO. So watch the Coop Scoop for information about upcoming campus events. Finally, we often need volunteers to chaperone field trips. At this time, all of our fall field trips are covered with using staff members as chaperones, but we hope to utilize volunteers on our spring overnight trips. Chris, who is our Dean of Nature Education, coordinates field trip volunteers.
The meeting started, so I had to start it. Because if he misses it, he misses it.
Oh, yeah, you need to mute. Is that from his phone?
No, it's my phone. Because I had
Okay, can everybody hear me now? I was talking about the need for volunteers on our upcoming spring field trips. Chris, our Dean of Nature Education, coordinates field trip volunteers, and he will take care of any trip-specific training in the spring with volunteers who are going to be going on those field trips. All right, next slide, please, Ms. Becky. Okay, so next we're going to get into the portion that has to do with health and safety. A lot of these things are things that we need to tell you as a school to prepare you for volunteering. So Becky, you can go ahead and advance. First of all, COVID protocols. We simply ask that volunteers follow the same basic COVID protocols as staff members. So please wear a mask indoors at all times. Outdoors, if you're not able to maintain at least 3 feet of physical distance, you will also need to wear a mask. If you are scheduled to volunteer and are feeling at all sick, please let the lead teacher know that you'll need to reschedule. If you have any specific questions about coming onto campus relating to COVID, Miss Glenda at our front desk is working closely with our school nurse, and she can answer any questions related to COVID protocols on campus. All right, now on to a few just health and safety basics. First of all, never go behind closed doors with a student. This is for everybody's protection, including your own. We don't want you to be in that position. So the door must be open or another adult must be present in a situation like that. Volunteers, when on campus, you'll use designated staff restrooms in the buildings that have them rather than using the student restrooms. Most of our buildings do. A few buildings just have single restrooms, in which case that is what you would use. A staff member in that building where you're volunteering will help you find the restroom to use, so you can ask someone. Volunteers do not assist students in the restroom or with dressing. Staff will handle those situations should they arise. Staff will also handle any first aid situations other than a simple Band-Aid. Any situation involving bodily fluids, such as blood or vomit, will be handled by staff who have had training in bloodborne pathogens. And finally, neither volunteers nor staff can apply bug spray, sunscreen, itch cream, or anything like that to students. These things have to be done before kids come to school. All right, next, a few words about our allergy aware policy. Rather than limiting what foods come onto campus, as a peanut-free school, for example, would do, the Pioneer Springs Board has adopted an allergy aware policy. This is designed to empower students to take age-appropriate responsibility for their allergies and for taking care of their classmates. And some of the reasons behind this policy include that it avoids a false sense of security that can sometimes exist in a peanut-free school. For instance, maybe there's a sibling in the house that attends a different school, and the lunches get mixed up or something like that, and all of a sudden there's peanut butter. It can be a surprise. With the allergy aware policy, we are prepared and know what to do. Also, there's many other allergens out there that can cause anaphylaxis besides peanuts, soy, dairy, shellfish, and environmental ones as well, like bee stings. So we want students to have and staff to have tools to deal with things besides peanut butter. Another aspect or element of the allergy aware policy is that students with food allergies don't sit at separate tables. We don't want to ostracize or stigmatize that. They sit with classmates, but it's the awareness and the hand washing and the hygiene is what is keeping the community safe. So as a volunteer, of course, you would never be asked to administer an EpiPen. Staff has been trained in how to do that. Just know that at lunches and snacks, students don't share food with each other, not even siblings. And that our elementary students wash their hands before and after eating. All right, we're going to move on to a few basics of volunteering. Becky, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. We'll start with confidentiality. This is a topic that we do take very seriously. Just as we protect children's physical safety, we also have to protect their reputations. And if you volunteer regularly in a classroom, you will get to know those students very well, and you'll find, of course, that each excels and struggles in different areas. So as volunteers, we ask that you be respectful of every Pioneer Springs family by not discussing individual students with other volunteers, parents, your children, or anyone else. And please have faith in our teachers and know that they know these children very well, and they meet them where they are every day. There may be things going on that you're not aware of and don't need to know in a role as a volunteer. So please avoid asking teachers questions about individual students, as they will tell you what you need to know in your role as a volunteer. And lastly, if you do have a concern about an individual student, share that with the teacher rather than going directly to that student's parent. All right, a few general words about safety. Of course, it's always a first priority. So whether you're on a field trip, at recess, or anywhere else on campus, just remember to always put the focus on the students. Try to avoid sideline conversations with other parents and volunteers. Of course, there's going to be times when you'll need to ask staff or other volunteers questions, and that's fine. But what we want to avoid is the clusters of grown-ups talking to each other at the expense of having their attention on students and safety. Remember to spread out if you're on the playground. If you do need to use your phone, we understand that situations do come up. We would just ask that you would maybe let a staff member know that you need to make a call and step away, sort of remove yourself from the situation, take care of it, and then return. Okay, a few words about behavior. In the classroom, if you do witness disrespectful or defiant behavior when you're volunteering, please let the teacher know. Of course, only teachers would discipline students, not volunteers. But as a volunteer, you can help by being that teacher's eyes and ears. Especially at the beginning of the school year, this is a time when students may be exploring boundaries or testing the waters. So please let the teacher know. They will treat it as a learning opportunity, and we'll want to address it right away. On another note regarding behavior, it is possible that your own child's behavior may change when you are there in the classroom with them as a volunteer, but it can help to prepare your child ahead of time by explaining, what that role looks like, and that when you're there volunteering, that you're going to be there for all the children in the class. Of course, you'll still be mom or dad or grandmother or grandfather first, but as a volunteer, you'll be there for everyone as well. Okay, a few just nuts and bolts things when we begin volunteering. Your first stop when you arrive on campus will be the front desk to sign in, and that is located at our administrative building, which is called the Castle, and that is at 9232 Bob Beatty Road. So once you get signed in, there is the walk-up window there to facilitate sign-in. From there, then you can park at the building in which you're volunteering if there's an available space. Parking is tight on campus right now. If you don't see an available space at that building, our overflow parking would be in the main parking lot in front of the Hive, or if that is full, on the grass kind of beside the Castle is another spot for overflow parking. Regarding bringing siblings when you're volunteering, if you're volunteering in a classroom, we ask that you don't bring younger siblings simply because the focus needs to be on the students in that class. However, for some outdoor opportunities, such as event setup, siblings are usually welcome. Supervision of them, of course, would be your responsibility. And if you're volunteering at an event, you'll have an opportunity to check in with whoever is coordinating that, most likely Aaron, to just make sure that it would be okay to bring younger siblings. And other than that, just remember that punctuality and reliability are very important. So please, if you're unable to make a volunteer slot that you've signed up for, just to give the lead teacher as much notice as possible so that they can make other arrangements, because a lot of times they are depending on their volunteers to make possible certain activities that they've planned. On to some volunteer roles. What do volunteers do at Pioneer Springs? The list is really almost endless. But a lot of times it is providing support to our amazing teaching staff, just giving general assistance in the classroom, on field trips, at class performances. You also could be working with individual students or small groups. You could be listening to children read. You may be preparing educational materials, and this is one that you can do if you're not available to be there volunteering during the school day. There's usually opportunities to prepare materials at home. And you could be sharing special knowledge that you have, from your experience through lectures and demonstrations, if it relates to some, a curriculum item that the class is studying. Other volunteer roles could include volunteering at Connect classes. Connect classes are our special area classes art, music, PE, and dance. So the thing to remember about this is that you absolutely don't need to have experience in that in art, music, PE, or dance, for instance, to volunteer and help in those classes. Those teachers are going to appreciate help just keeping students focused on the activity, making sure that everyone is using the materials respectfully and things like that. So don't be shy about coming to art class if you haven't created a lot of art. Lunch is another great time to volunteer. If you do volunteer during lunch, just be sure to model manners for our students to emulate. Remember not to judge what children are eating, and also remember from our allergy aware policy that students don't share food. And if you happen to hear students talking about maybe you want to try this or so forth, you can sort of redirect and remind them that we don't do that. And also, of course, students do wash their hands before and after eating. Recess is also a rewarding time to volunteer, to be with students. At Pioneer Springs, recess is unstructured by design. We think that play is a powerful teacher. We believe in natural play. That is why our playgrounds don't necessarily look like a lot of other schools. We don't have a lot of the pre-manufactured play equipment. What we have instead are creating sort of mini environments that support imaginative play and creative play. And we repurpose trees that are at the end of their life and have to come down. A lot of times we get those safely on the ground horizontally and turn those into play structures. So it's like many things at Pioneer Springs, our play areas are sort of mission driven and a little different than what you may find at other schools. If you see that children are playing together by themselves, exploring their environment, observing insects, digging a hole if it's in an appropriate place, usually the sandbox is the best place for that. Anything like that, if they're safely engaged in those activities, that is, that's kind of the goal. And there's little that we can do as adults to enhance that. So in those cases, your job is simply to be an observer, with your eyes on everything and kind of, go move close. If there's a large group of students somewhere, you would want to sort of move a little closer to that group to just establish a presence. And that's usually all that is necessary. If you do see something that is a safety concern, of course, let a staff member know. Definitely, as we already mentioned, spread out on the playground. We do have to keep every child visible. We have a lot of different play areas that we can utilize if we have enough eyes on the playground to keep students visible. Avoid using devices at recess. If you need to make a call, as we said, just let another staff member know and step away. Regarding natural items, there is a lot of cool stuff that kids find at Pioneer Springs, either items from nature, rocks, sticks, whatever, or sometimes occasionally an item that might have historical significance, since our campus is, part of our campus is in a National Register historic district. So if the temptation is to take something home from the playground, just remind students that nature stays at Pioneer Springs, or nature stays in nature, and that similarly we can't take if you find something that looks like an artifact of any kind, let a staff member know, and we'll try to collect those and in the hopes of having some kind of a display in the future. All right, we are going to move on now to let's talk about the classroom environment at Pioneer Springs. These are, these are the things, some of the stuff that we've gone over so far, the health and safety, those are things that we have to tell you. You have to hear from us. Moving now into some things that we want you to know. The teachers do an amazing job of creating this environment. And so as volunteers, we want you to have an understanding of the why behind that, so that you can kind of contribute to that environment. It's a celebratory environment. It's empowering, respectful. We want Pioneer Springs to always be a place where students feel safe, capable, and significant, where they feel they belong and have ownership of their learning experience. An important part of the Pioneer Springs experience for our children is learning how to be independent and interact with their peers in constructive ways. And we just want to keep all of those goals in mind in our interactions with students and the language that we use with students. The climate here is discovery-based. Students are encouraged to try things for themselves, discover the answers rather than being told the answers. It's a safe place to take risks and learn from mistakes. And it's a place to practice skills. Academic skills, yes, absolutely. But also all the other skills that are important to success: problem solving, communicating with peers, showing respect for other members of the community, as well as respect for themselves. One thing, here's an example. One thing that some students need to practice is using their own voice. Let's say that that a student is, says, someone, they're not letting me do something. They're not letting me, go on the zip line or swing on the rope swing. It would be easy for us as adults to say, okay, everybody, we're going to take turns. It's your turn next, and kind of sort it out that way, which would work. But if our focus is on letting them, learn to do these things for themselves, we might approach it more as a facilitator, and get some students together and say, hey, everybody, so-and-so has something to say. And then, okay, so-and-so, everybody's listening, go ahead. And then if they're a little hesitant, you might, help them, with the words at first. And then the next time they have to do that, they may be able to do more of that for themselves. And so facilitating a conversation instead of just sort of laying down the law, not depriving the child of an opportunity to be a participant in solving that problem. In classroom centers, if you're working in a classroom, volunteering in a classroom, art and writing are often involved. In situations like this, it's best to avoid modeling those situations because we want students to develop self-confidence and self-reliance, and modeling can make them more dependent on someone else to show them how to do something. So for instance, if say they're creating a Valentine for their mom and say, I don't, or I want to draw, I want a picture of our dog on this card, but I don't know how to draw a dog. Can you draw a dog for me? You can just say, well, what does a dog have? There's legs. Yep. How many legs? 4 legs. Okay. So draw 4 legs. And then what else does a dog have? Tail. So so kind of instead of modeling it for them, just kind of talk it through. And if all the legs are not in the right place and the tail is not exactly where it should be either, no problem. So once again, trying to give students opportunities to practice the skills that we want to have, that we want them to develop. Ultimately, we can't give children self-esteem because that's something that they have to develop from within. So what we can do is just give them opportunities to practice the skills that we want them to develop. And that is a lot of what we try to do in Pioneer Springs classrooms. All right, moving on to positive language. This is something that we emphasize with our staff and want volunteers to know about it as well. It's basically, this simply refers to the habit of giving suggestions or directions by stating things in the positive. And it really can make a difference because it puts the emphasis on what students can do rather than what they can't do. So for example, please walk instead of don't run. Or simply, you can say walking feet. Books are for reading instead of don't throw books. Instead of don't cut in line, there is a place for you in line behind James. Another way that you can put a positive spin on directions is to substitute as soon as for if you don't. So instead of saying, if you don't put on your shoes, you can't go on the zip line, you can just as easily say, as soon as you get your shoes on, you can go on the zip line. So does it make a huge difference? It makes a difference. So, and I think every little bit helps. So we do try to use positive language in situations where we can. Does that mean it's not that if a student is in a safety, we see a safety concern, are we not, yes, the staff will say no or stop. However, but it will carry a lot of weight if students are not used to hearing that, unless it's really necessary to use something in the negative like that. Okay, Becky, we can move on, I think. Okay, so next, talking a little bit about praise versus encouragement. This idea that praising children is not always the best impulse was a difficult concept for me to grasp when I was originally introduced to it as a parent volunteer at the Children's Schoolhouse many years ago. And the reason is because we give praise for all the right reasons. We want to support and encourage children. We want to help them feel good about themselves and to help build their self-confidence. However, there's certain types of praise that can send another message as well, a message of judgment. And that is in part because a lot of praise is often stated in terms of our reaction to an accomplishment instead of focusing on the accomplishment itself. You know, if we say good job, we're the ones who are judging that it was a good job versus a bad job. And too much of that generic praise, like good job, it can shift the focus from a child's accomplishment to that verbal reward that they get. And there's a writer, Alfie Kohn, I believe, who uses the term praise junkies to describe the negative effects of that. Those unintended effects where a child can lose interest in an activity when that verbal reward is not available. And so that they're dependent on our approval rather than just engaging in the activity for its own sake. Also, children feel less likely to take risks when they are focused on that praise, that verbal reward. Children are less likely to choose a difficult task if they're focused on a good job type reward. Whereas if we're acknowledging their effort and how hard they're working, they're more likely to attempt something difficult. Generic praise like good job, it also sort of tells children how to feel instead of allowing them to evaluate for themselves. And we do want to instill that, what a child thinks about himself or herself is the most important thing, more important than what others think about them. Okay, Becky, we can advance. So what is the alternative to that type of praise? The answer is non-judgmental encouragement. The main takeaway is that you don't have to evaluate to encourage. Like I said, we want children to know that we support them, that we're interested in what they're doing, but this sort of non-judgmental encouragement can send the same message as that generic praise. So what does this look like? It's just specific encouragement or observation that refers to the act or the accomplishment itself rather than our evaluation of it. It always puts the focus on the process rather than the product. And in doing it, avoids competition and comparison. So it's basically just taking our reaction or our judgment out of the equation when we want to positively reinforce something that we see. So one way to do that is just to simply say what you see. Like a child, say a kindergartner is trying to zip up a winter coat. It's not easy, but they did it. You could, instead of saying good job, you could say, I saw you zipped up your coat by yourself. And when you do it that way, it's, we noticed, we saw it, but there's no judgment implied, but it sends the same message. Some good substitutes for good job are you did it or congratulations. You did it really focuses on the accomplishment. So I find myself trying to substitute you did it for good job when I can. Let's see, if you witness a caring or generous act on the part of a student and you want to reinforce that, you can point out the effect that it had on the other student. Look at Susie's face. I can tell that she's happy that you gave her a turn. That's a little different than the adult saying how the adult feels about the students taking turns. Then I included a quotation at the bottom of this slide that I think sums it up pretty well from Timothy Evans. Encouraging statements separate students' work from their worth. We don't ever want them to think that we're judging their worth, how smart they are, et cetera, when we comment on their work. Okay, Becky, we can move on. I've included a slide more specifically about art. creative exploration of curriculum is a staple in Pioneer Springs classrooms. So art is happening everywhere, not just in the art room. And art is definitely process oriented at Pioneer Springs. And that is because we think the real learning comes from the creative act as opposed to the finished product. So using encouraging language is a great way to talk about art with kids. So when you are talking about student art, remember to focus your comments on the process rather than the product, using words like, I see you used a lot of red paint here. Something like that then is going to be a great jumping off point for you to ask a question. Tell me more about that. Why did you make that choice? If you ask them why they made a choice, they will tell you what is important about that to them. And so asking questions is definitely important. How did you do that? Have you ever used that technique before? Was this hard to create? Was this easy for you? Ask them questions about their process and you'll find out a lot. Keep your comments specific and objective. This is a bold use of color rather than this is great. Always acknowledge the effort. I can tell you've been working very hard on this. One neat trick is, to substitute the words I notice for the words I like. So you could say, I noticed the trees in your picture because, some sort of specific observation about the trees rather than I love those trees. So yes, focusing on the process is definitely the way that we like to talk about art at Pioneer Springs. And encouraging them to just describe their ideas, their efforts. We do want them to learn to evaluate their own work rather than depending on grown-ups or others for that validation. Tell me about this is always a great starting. You may be looking at some art and you're not exactly sure what it might depict. So tell me about this is a great way to start a conversation, and they will tell you what's important about it to them, and you can go from there. Back to what we were talking about with positive language and with praise versus encouragement. We do want to praise art because we want children to know that we support them and we're noticing, we're interested in what they're doing. But non-judgmental comments can accomplish the same goal and sort of take the evaluation out of the picture. So I've reached the end of what I have to tell you about volunteering. I do want to thank everybody so much for attending this and for being willing to volunteer. The last thing to mention is there is a volunteer application form. We need all parent volunteers to fill this out. This form gives us your consent for us to run a background check, and as well as gathering some other basic information. This is a Google form that you can fill out and sign electronically. It is available on the website, which is pioneersprings.org. And if you go to the Parents tab and then scroll down and select Forms and Materials, it will be included in that tab. So once again, thank you, everybody. We're excited about being able to welcome volunteers onto campus in the near future, and be on the lookout for volunteer requests from teachers in their weekly communications, as well as information in the Coop Scoop about upcoming events.
Mr. Randolph, I wonder, are you available to take a few questions if we populate those in the chat room right now?
Yes, I certainly can. And if I don't have an answer, then I will be happy to follow up by email with an answer.
Okay, so participants, if you have a question, if you'll put them in the chat, I'm going to scroll through those and put them out for Randolph to answer. The first, is there going to be another meeting for parents that are still at work and can't be on this Zoom, or is there another way for folks to access this content?
The answer is yes. Either by viewing a recorded version of this one or holding another session in some form, there will be another opportunity. And so we will can provide information about that and most likely in the Coop Scoop. Does that sound right?
That sounds
Yeah.
spot on.
Yeah, we can do that. Absolutely.
Hey, Chelsea, I just want to echo your question about the fall trips. I think you all know, those of you who have been at the school know we've been very cautious in the way that we've approached the school year to try to maximize our time on campus. And so in planning for the fall trips, we determined we would go ahead and use staff who were already on campus and familiar with our protocols. We hope that by the time we get to the spring adventures, that our community can volunteer and participate in those particular trips. Let's see.
Can you, I'm seeing one about a question about the volunteer form, but I can't see the whole question. Can you see that, Becky?
I don't think I've gotten to that yet. Here's a question about, can we put a link to the slides on the website? I can certainly do that in that same space that Randolph has mentioned, if Randolph, you want to share them.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks, Krista Davenport. I see there's an issue with the form, so I'll go in and fix that after this meeting.
Okay.
Let's see, just a general comment. Jonathan, you mentioned that, we had currently suspended volunteering due to COVID. We've been successful now going into the 7th week of school across the campus total. We've had 10 incidences of people on campus who have later tested positive for COVID, and that's a pretty small number comparatively when you think about, we have about 500 bodies on campus every day. So we do think we're at the point that we can, in a very controlled and careful way, begin to bring volunteers into our community and get back to that aspect of what it means to be a community school. Karen, COVID vaccinations required for volunteers. They are not. I will tell you, and Abigail might address this, our board chair is with us this evening, but there's a subcommittee of the board called the Governance Committee, and one of their tasks this year is to continually consider what our best practice is to keep our school open and functioning and everybody in our community safe. One of the conversations they'll be having in their meeting this month is about any of the requirements that we're going to put in place for staff. And part of that dialogue is about whether random testing will be included as part of the protocol. Including volunteers in that kind of random testing is something that might be talked about as part of that conversation, but there haven't been any decisions made, and currently there are no requirements. Abigail, is there anything you want to add to that?
Not really. That's that. Sorry, hold on. We're getting some feedback. Okay. No, everything you said, Becky, is correct, and there are no other decisions that have been made at this point.
Okay. Well, it looks like that's all the questions, unless anybody else has anything. It's always our practice in our Pioneer Spring Zoom meetings that we'll typically stay on the call for about 10 minutes afterwards in case there are things that are unique to your family or your situation. But other than that, please anticipate that I'll fix the link tonight for the volunteer application for those of you who have already seen the error. And we're appreciative that you're here and that you're willing to volunteer and be part of the magic that happens on the Pioneer Springs campus.
Miss Becky.
There is one more question. It's from someone about, do they need to fill out the form if they have already done it previously? And I think we do want everybody to fill out a new form regardless, just so everything. Okay, just wanted to get that one answered too.
Kathy, I think you started to ask a question, and it's good to see you here this evening.
Good evening, Miss Becky. Actually, that was the question that I was actually going to reiterate as well. So covered.
And I do see we have new families on the call. Hello, Jeff Hart. We're looking forward to welcoming Sochi tomorrow to school. Anybody else have a question? Okay. Well, Jeff, if you want to stay on for a second, I got your text with your question, and I'll be glad to give you the information that you and Dasha are looking for. So you feel good about bringing Sochi tomorrow. Thanks for being on tonight, everybody.
Thanks, Miss Becky.
Randolph, I'm going to introduce you to see where it says Sochi Hart. This is Jeff Hart, a former colleague of mine, and I've known Jeff, and there's Sochi and his wife Dasha for probably what, 6, 7 years now, Jeff?
I think this is 8 years. Yeah.
8 years.
Wow. Wow, it's
Sochi,
great to see you guys. Welcome.
when did you get back from Russia, Sochi?
I would say 2 days ago, maybe 3.
And you're coming to school tomorrow.
We're hopeful. The little one is still pretty jet lagged.
That's a big trip for a baby.
Yep, indeed.
Well, listen, Sochi, your teacher's name is Miss Betty Ann
Second grade.
in 2nd grade, and she knows that you're coming. And tomorrow, Jeff, is Dasha bringing her?
That is the plan.
Okay. So when she comes through Carline tomorrow, I will text you the address of the building, but we're going to have you guys park at the administrative building. And then I'll walk over with Dasha and Sochi to introduce them to the classroom and make sure everybody gets settled. You guys good with that?
Anything that you say turns to gold, so I'm good. Yep.
Yeah, say my boss is on this call, so you just keep saying that stuff.
Well, whoever your boss is, she's very lucky to have.
There's our board chair right there, Jeff.
How are you?
Hi, well, welcome. It's nice to meet you and welcome to Pioneer Springs.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think
Jeff?
you're ready, huh?
Becky, I just want to make sure, since you had made me co-host, if I leave, am I going to mess you up or anything?
You probably are, and unless Laura, you or Tim, if either one of you have a question you want to ask.
I believe there is a question about attendance for this meeting. Is that? And so there's not a sheet to sign, but I believe Becky has taken attendance in another way to, is that, can you confirm that?
Yes.
The screenshot. So
We're gonna go.
I think we're good, Tim.
Very good. Thank you very much.
But thank you for the presentation, and we are so excited and thrilled and hope that this is a better alternative than the distinguished public school that she's currently in for various reasons, which we can talk about at some point, but thank you again.
Oh, you're
Hey,
very
I look
welcome.
forward to seeing Dasha and Sochi in the morning. I'll miss seeing you, but we'll catch up soon.
Well, I'm gonna try to be the one to get down there to pick up a couple of days, but we'll talk when we can all breathe.
And I will
Sounds
see you at afternoon pickup for those grade levels and for morning drop off as well. And
Okay.
typically.
Yep.
Thank you again.
Sochi, see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good job, Randolph.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks for all your help.
Yep.
I've done it without you.
And honestly, I think for something that's this big, you probably do need multiple people, really. I mean, it's and then also, I don't know in the future if you want to have a cutoff time that people can't join. Well, you had some people that really missed a lot that I let in, and it was almost over. So just as something for the future to consider.
It was a good first run. There
Anyway,
were,
it
what,
was good.
about 65 people?
We're still recording. Can you
fun.
can you take that part off? Can you edit the recording?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'll clean it up.
Great.
All right, then.
All righty.
Hope you guys have a good evening.
Thank you
Thanks,
too.
Becky.
Becky.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.